Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What is the most paranormal thing that has ever happened to you or anyone you know? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was 2 or 3 and remember going to my grandparents all the time. My grandfather wasn't a talker. He was quiet, kept to himself, and sat in his chair all day. Sadly, Grandma ended up passing when I was 3 or 4, and I don't remember seeing my grandfather again after that. Fast forward 10 years, and my parents had my grandfather's chair in their living room. For some reason I mentioned, oh yeah, I remember Grandpa sitting in his chair every time we visited, but he never talked. Why was he so quiet? My parents paused and looked at each other and said, well, he died before you were born. I was at a sushi restaurant with my dad, and suddenly his sake cup just quickly moved a few inches without making a sound. We both dismissed it and didn't say anything. Then it happened again, and we both asked if we both saw that. We kept moving it around, and it suddenly moved back to the same spot every time. The table was dry and the floor was level. This was a week or 2 after his dad or my grandpa died. I wondered if it was him, and he made a toast with the cup. I never talked about it again. I heard my husband yell my name angrily inside the house. My 7-year-old heard him yell her name and came to find me to ask if she was in trouble and why Dad was home from work. He was not home from work. I called him to make sure. I also used to hear whispers at night, like 2 people were on a talk show radio when I was falling asleep at night. I worked at a seaside inn in New England in college. One night after dinner service, a bunch of us heard the unmistakable sound of dishes breaking on the kitchen floor after service. We were at the bar. We all went to the kitchen. There were broken dishes on the floor, and the lights were off when it went in. We then heard breaking glass in the bar. We went back, and the frickin' lights were off, and there were broken beer bottles on top of an aluminum cooler. When I was in 3rd grade, I was living with my grandparents. My parents had divorced, and my father remarried a woman who had kids of her own, whom they both favored over my siblings and me. Ugh. When my father wasn't home, his wife was abusive to his kids, never her own. She would accuse us of breaking jewelry and stealing things as justification for her discipline. My dad didn't lift a finger to stop it or defend us. When it became clear that I was on the road to a trip to the ER from her punishments from injuries that mandated reporters could see, my fine, upstanding, church-going community member masquerading as a dad took me to my grandparents to live, making me lie on the floorboard so I wouldn't be seen. One of my teachers, Mrs. Gunner, took an interest in me and was particularly kind. She reached out to my grandparents and became a friend to all of us. One day in the lunchroom, she collapsed. I remember the other teachers laying her on a folded-up lunch table as a makeshift stretcher and carrying her out to wait for an ambulance while the students watched. My grandfather got a call later that evening saying that she had passed away. Sometime during that night, she came and just stood at the foot of my bed. She was wearing a white dress and was glowing. She didn't speak. She just looked at me with the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. I felt surrounded by love and peace, even knowing that she was saying goodbye and I'd never see her again. I'm now staring down the barrel at 60 years old, and I can still remember her smile as a child who desperately needed it. Thank you, Mrs. Gunner. You made a real difference. May your crown shine brighter than the sun, beautiful lady, till we meet again. When I was young, probably around 9, I caught chickenpox. I woke up in the middle of the night one night and called for my mom because little kids can't do shit for themselves when they are sick. A woman came into my bedroom, sat on my bed, and stroked my hair until I fell asleep. For whatever reason, I thought she was my grandmother, but she was dressed funny. When I woke up the next morning, I went downstairs for breakfast and asked where my grandma was, and my mom told me that she was at her house, like she always was. I told my mom she'd been in my room the night before, and my mom laughed and said that I'd just been dreaming. However, my aunt, who tended to believe that more, was babysitting me that day. The upside to chickenpox meant there was no school for me, and I told her the story. She asked me to describe the weird outfit. and it was an old nurse's outfit from the 60s. My family knew the previous owners of the house. The wife was a nurse in the 60s and had died a few months previously. Can I say with 100% certainty that I had an encounter with a ghost? No, but it's certainly a bizarre coincidence. I know they came out with like a vaccine for chickenpox. I had it when I was a kid. I remember like a kid would have it and your parents were like, come on, we're going over to Billy's house because they wanted you to get chickenpox. I don't know. Do people still get it? I'm out of the loop, I suppose. I was maybe 8 or 9, maybe 10. I was at one of my friend's houses. I used to be good friends with her, and I needed to go to the bathroom. I got in there, and I saw a hand reach out from behind the shower curtain. I looked behind it, and her cat was there. It wasn't a cat's paw I saw, though. It was a full-on human hand with no human behind it. I don't think I've ever experienced anything as scary as that. I was really young, like 8 years old, doing homework on my desk in my bedroom alone with the door shut. An eraser was thrown from behind me and bounced off the wall in front of me, like 2 feet from my face. I heard it hit the wall. I saw it when it landed on my desk. I looked up and could see the mark it made on the wall. I told my parents in a panic, and I was brushed off. Effed me up basically forever. Never happened again, but like... I lived in a haunted house by my great aunt. She had passed away there in the living room. She would lock me out and do lots of little things. I was so tired one night after work that I got in bed and she turned the lamp across the room on. You had to completely turn a round switch to turn it on or off. I just had it, so I yelled at her to turn it off. I'm tired. She did. My mom was at a friend's house in the late 70s. She was in bed, and she woke up to someone, who she thought was her friend, brushing her hair at a beauty desk. My mom said something, I can't remember what for sure, to the girl brushing her hair. The girl didn't respond, and my mom actually went back to bed as it was early. Later, she found out that her friend was still asleep in the room next door and never got up to brush her hair. My mom also found out that there was a girl who lived there before her friend and had committed suicide in that room. The only time that anything paranormal happened to anyone I know. It still gives me goosebumps to this day. When my dad was dying in the hospital from liver failure, my mom requested that we go down to the hospital chapel for Sunday service. We were about 20 minutes into the service when quite abruptly, I felt this rush of cool air pass through me, like right through the center of me. It was gentle but forceful and swift at the same time. It was not at all scary, but it was a physical sensation. I asked my mom if she felt that breeze, and she had no idea what the heck I was talking about. I just blurted out that I think Daddy just died and we need to go back to his room. When we arrived back on his floor, my aunts were waiting for us by the elevators. I don't remember saying he's dead, isn't he? My aunt just nodded, and I felt rather peaceful, knowing that was my dad's energy passing through me and saying goodbye to me. It was a wonderful gift. I was traveling from Arizona to Colorado. I stopped just outside of Shiprock, New Mexico, on the side of the road at around midnight to take a nap. I was awoken an hour later by a nightmare of angry faces and bright flashing colors coming at me from all directions. I started my car and turned on the headlights. 10 feet directly in front of me were a coyote and a jackrabbit sitting about 5 feet from each other, just staring at me. I got the heck out of there. Years later, I was dating a Navajo girl, and when I told her about it, she became very upset and told me to never mention it to her again. I used to work at one of the oldest psychiatric hospitals in England. I have many stories, but my favorite was the day I was working in the forensic unit on the grounds. Myself and my colleague, now my best friend, we had to work in pairs on that unit. We're domestic cleaners and were followed around all day by a ghost. We started our shift at 7:30 a.m. as usual. First, we heard tapping on a large glass light fitting. I made the mistake of calling the ghost a dickhead. After that, it was chaos all day. My friend was pulled backwards by her shirt collar. A toilet flushed on its own in a patient's bathroom, motion sensor activated. And we heard things falling over in cupboards in a room that was rarely used. We heard a shuffling noise and later discovered paper towels in the adjoining toilet. I had just sink outside the toilet, and the toilet door was closed. It turns out the sound we heard was paper towels being pulled from the dispenser. I have no idea how they got into the loo, though. Another day, my friend heard kids laughing audibly. It was a weird place. My grandmother started dating again after my grandfather died of cancer. Her friend died from cancer about 15 years later. We were cleaning out the house, and there was a definitely cold column in the basement and attic. Effed up havoc. I'm sure, but when you see his bedroom or her stuff in the basement, his ex's rose perfume would overpower it. I never understood it, but I was always being nice and saying, "Hi, X." X passed on. We're just showing and moving stuff. I used to take photos of roadside memorials. I thought they were interesting and wanted to make a photo journal. I came across a large one in the desert on a road in Nevada with 2 large crosses and 2 small, clearly implying a family had passed away. Lots of toys, fake flowers, etc. It was a dark model when I took the photo, and when I saw it on my digital camera, there were 4 glowing orbs above memorial. I took more photos, but the orbs never actually appeared anywhere except in the first photo. It was pitch black in the desert, and there was nothing that would have caused a reflection. I always thought I took a photo of ghosts. When I was younger, about 6th grade, and moving to a new city, my mother and I were looking at new houses. After a long day of going house to house, we found one that my mom and I instantly fell in love with. When it was time to go into one of the last rooms, we all walked in, and I remember walking into this small, pale blue room and getting this weird feeling throughout my body and having to run outside and throw up. My mom and realtor followed, and that's when she asked me how we knew what just happened. And then my mom, confused, said, "Knew what?" And then she told my mom that someone had recently died in that room. I still have dreams about that room. My little sister was talking to herself downstairs. Only my mom was home. She said she was talking to the little boy. Years later, my dad was installing some drywall options. He knelt in front of the TV to change the channels, and in the reflection, a little boy ran behind him, and he got into his karate pose because it scared him. He called out to me and my mom and realized he was home alone. He should get out ASAP. In the same part of my basement, there's a 2x3 mirror with a mountainscape on it, and I was watching King of the Hill on that same TV and got up to go upstairs. Something caught my attention in the mirror of my peripheral vision, and something I can only describe as Rob Zombie, covered in mud, was staring at me in the mirror and silently yelling at me. I ran upstairs. We've all seen a shade in the hallway outside my sister's bedroom. My cousin used to sleep over as a kid, and they all had stories about running into the hallway and cabinets slamming at night. My one cousin would wake up with scratches. He's pushing 40, and he would never ever consider sleeping over here again. I could go on, but that's all I got. Me and my friends used to walk down the sewers as a kid, and the tunnels would go miles pitch black. At one point, it's like waist-high water that we didn't want to cross into. And looking directly at the water, we all could see a shadow of a girl who looked like she was standing on top of the water. We all ran out of there, and we all swore that we heard a girl screaming as we left the tunnels. We never went back and never wanted to. Around 9 p.m., I was walking home, passing by two abandoned houses that were next to each other. The house's land is separated by a 3-foot tall stone wall. Just as I was passing by, I saw a black cat at the back of the first house, just near the wall of the house itself, run toward the wall, then separates both yards, so it is actually running toward the road. It froze in place and then suddenly dashed through the air in a straight line and landed on top of that wall. By now, it looked like a heron. It's like the cat shapeshifted during that little dash. It was transparent and brown in color, just like a shadow. But you could probably tell a shadow apart from that. It's hard to explain, but that's what it looked like. After that, it jumped from there are changed forms. Come again? The closest thing I could find to describe it would be a pterodactyl. It rose in the air and started flapping its wings slowly, as if it were gliding through the air in the direction of where I was walking, still within the house's yard. It also felt like it was moving in slow motion. I'd imagine if a bird did the exact same thing, it would be moving about 5 times faster. It continued slowly to flap its wings and getting forward until it slowly became more and more transparent and faded away completely. This all happened in about 10 seconds. The nearest red light doesn't properly illuminate in the area, and it was almost pitch black. I only saw what I saw because of the moonlight.